If you ever fall out of your pirouettes, you need to watch this episode. Hey, what's up, dancer? This is Gina McFadden of Dancer 360, your go-to coach for all things dancer health related, body, mind, and soul. And today, I'm coming to you with a little bit of pirouette help, because we've all had those days where we're hopping through our pirouettes, or falling off from one side or the other, or just never sticking the landing. So I want to give you my 6 tips based on my experience as a professional dancer and as a dance educator of 25 years that will hopefully help you stay on that leg and make a nice clean landing of your pirouettes. Tip number 1 is to stack your skeleton. And what I mean by that is stand up nice and tall and literally place your head right over your shoulders, shoulders over your rib cage over your pelvis, and so on down the line, all the way down to your supporting foot. I like to think of a rod coming in through the top of my head and sort of skewering myself all the way down to the floor, connecting into the ground. This sort of stacking your skeleton mindset will definitely help you if you tend to fall to one side or the other in a pirouette. Tip number 2 to help you have more successful turns is to bounce like a ball. And while that might sound funny, bouncing like a ball will pulse your body straight up rather than off to one side or the other, which is what happens to a lot of dancers in their preparation for their turn. One foot pushes more than the other, and the turn doesn't have a vertical effect. So while we're thinking of tip number 1, which is stacking our skeleton, add on tip number 2, which when you take off for that pirouette, in your mind's eye, you're thinking of bouncing up like a ball. On to tip number 3. I want you to think of your head screwing into the top of the ceiling like a corkscrew. So tip number 3 is treat your head up into the ceiling like a corkscrew. This will take into effect the fact that a pirouette has a rotation to it, but will keep us from getting too wobbly and maintain that nice vertical alignment in our pirouette. So stack that on to tip number 1 and 2. Tip number 4, think tall sides of your body. Oftentimes when a pirouette is unsuccessful, it's because one side of the rib cage collapses and the other stays tall. So if we can think tall on 2 sides of the body, this will help keep any leaning from happening. So if we add that on to tip number 1, stack your skeleton, and tip number 2, bounce like a ball, and tip number 3, that corkscrew feeling up into the ceiling, we've got a great vertical placement without any tipping happening. Tip number 5 is to make your arms your friend. What oftentimes happens with dancers and their pirouettes is arms are kind of an afterthought because it's this whirling motion that we're pushing off of with our legs, but the fact of the matter is your arms can really harm or help your pirouette. In a classical ballet turn, if our elbows aren't lifted and our arms aren't supported, this sort of affects the entire posture. Also, oftentimes we have our arms in fifth en avant for pirouettes, and if they're too long, that can pull our center of gravity off. So we want to keep a nice, tight, condensed, lifted, and supported carriage of the arms in our turn so that we make our arms our friends rather than something that drags down our posture or slows down the speed of the turn. My 6th and final tip, and this one is my favorite, is to stick the landing. Literally, force yourself to stick the landing no matter how awful that turn might have been. If you focus on sticking the landing every single time, you will be committed to finishing your turns, even if they're not ideal. There was a dancer I really looked up to when I was an apprentice with the Joffrey Ballet, and she could finish any turn, even if the turn was looking like it was on a 45-degree angle. She had disciplined her mind and her body to stick that landing no matter what. And I was so impressed with that. She didn't give up. She didn't be like, oh, okay, well, that's my left side. She made her body follow what her mind told it to do. Now, it's not going to happen automatically, but what I'm asking you to do is to commit to sticking the landing, even if you feel like the turn was crummy. The more that we commit ourselves to finishing the turns, the more successful ultimately our turns are going to be. And when you're mentally committing to sticking that finish, you're automatically mentally committed to that pirouette, to putting all you have into a really good turn. Dancer, I hope these 6 points are helpful to you, and I hope that you have a very happy turning day when you apply these. Hey, if you want to see any new content from me, if there's anything that I can help you with, send me an email at gina@dancer-360.com. I want to hear what your needs are because I'm here to support you. My work is all about helping you become the best dancer that you can be. So I will see you here next 360 Thursday, and until that time, dancer, keep shining on with all that you are.